I'll now ask members of the panel to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Longstaff. I'm a local councillor from Armandbury.
And I'm Councillor John Taylor from Carpetton Ward.
Okay, we have apologies today from Councillor Will Simpson and Councillor Matthew McLaughlin, both giving their apologies. I'd like to thank Councillor Sue Lee Richards, who's no longer a member of this panel due to changes within the council. This is the last meeting of the municipal year, but she's attended every other meeting. We have got a resignation from Gary Kitchen, who was a co-optee on the panel. I'd like to thank him for his service. So we're a little bit depleted for this last meeting of the municipal year on the council side, but we've got lots of people from the officer side to make up for that, so that's great. But thank you for coming today. So, first thing, minutes of the previous meeting. Is there any items that you wish to...
No, they're correct, accurate record of the meeting. And there's an action point where I think me and an officer were meeting over Fennybeck flooding, and we've completed that meeting.
That's great.
Okay.
Good stuff. Okay, anything else? No. So that's the minutes of the previous meeting. Approved. Any declarations of interest that anybody wishes to bring? No. Admission of the public. This meeting will be in the public session. We have no deputations or petitions. I've not been made of any public questions coming to this meeting. So, straight on to the first item on the agenda, the severe weather debrief report.
Thank you, Chair. Sean Westerby, Kirklees Council Emergency Planning Team Manager. And outside of me, I've got Martin Jordan. It's a bit of a double act between ourselves. I'm going to introduce the first few slides, and Martin's going to then talk about the actual debrief itself. So, just to set the scene for the committee, I wanted to go through sort of like the planning process we go around a severe weather response, because it's I don't want people thinking that we do it on the fly. We have got a plan. It is data-led. It has got triggers in it, and that's how we activate around a severe weather response. So just so people are clear, we have a plan, we follow the plan. Just so I don't want people thinking it's not, I'm trying to say it's not sort of made up, the response. It's predetermined, we follow a plan, basically. And in that sort of plan, we have got a command and control system. So some people, strategic, tactical, operational, or gold, silver, bronze. We don't always activate the command and control, but we do most at times. It varies. There's a lot of flexibility in the plan to officers to use their own judgment, depending on what situation we're responding to. And as part of good emergency management practice, we do debriefs. So when we've done a response, we do look back at that response and try and pick out what went well, what didn't go so well, and learn lessons from that. So that's what we're doing today. Next slide. So we're going to discuss two weather events that we responded to. One was flooding, and one was the sort of cold weather event. I think it's probably the cold weather event that's going to generate more questions, but we were two events on back of each other, which is quite unique. And the cold weather event was very unique in that the cold stuff stayed on the ground for quite a long time, which it wasn't the amount of snow that we had that was a problem. It was the temperatures, but I'm sure Chris from Highways can explain the science behind the gritting and how they activate around that. And I suppose it's also important to recognise there's quite a few officers from different services here today, so it's not just emergency planning's role in severe weather, it's not just highways. We've got colleagues from housing services, we've got a few apologies from different services, we've got flood management here as well. So there are a lot of different services within the council that respond to a severe weather event. So some of the questions, depending on what questions you've got, some of the answers might have to come from them teams, and we might have to get answers from them teams. So that's my bit. So Martin, do you want to
Yeah, so as Sean said, as with any emergency or incident that we deal with, we look to learn lessons, identify what went well, and areas of improvement, what we can improve on for future incidents and events. So just a real quick summary on these slides of what went well in the rain and flood, in the snow and ice, and then what didn't go so well. I'm not going to read directly from the slides because you've got the presentations, but what went well was using multiple sources of credible forecasting information. So Sean mentioned we've got a severe weather plan. That plan is data-led, it's intelligence-led. We get credible forecasting from our partners at the Met Office, but also from some private providers as well. And that data-led intelligence and approach to sort of preparedness and response stands us in good stead. So that was identified as something that went well. Social media response to the weather was generally well received by those that follow our accounts. Those accounts are primarily the @Kirklees Winter Twitter or X account and the Kirklees website. And teams across the organisation worked well together to share information, share resources and respond. We do a lot of work behind the scenes to test exercise plans, to train officers and such like. And we've got really effective ways to sort of share information between teams, request support, and there seems to be a real good sort of shared understanding of the different roles of different council teams that get involved in a severe weather response, what their limitations are, what their capabilities are, and sort of a mutual understanding between officers as to who's responsible for what. With the snow and ice, a lot of the same learning was a lot of the same good practice was identified using multiple sources of credible forecasting information. Social media response went well. We also provided assistance to schools to stay open. Some schools cited that the reason that they were looking to close was because the highway wasn't clear outside the schools, so those schools that did request assistance from us were able to get that assistance in the form of highway gritting and pavement clearing. That enables some schools to open safely. And also teams involved in the severe weather emergency protocol, we call that SWEP for rough sleepers. They were engaged with quickly, meaning that timely assessments and referrals could take place. So I'm not going to read too much through the next few slides, but there was learning and there were subsequent forward actions that have been taken and are progressing nicely in accordance with the deadlines that were allocated to each learning point. Some of the learning points included road close signs being moved by residents and road closures being ignored. Possible opportunities to further improve the post-flood intelligence gathering online. Schools were using lots of different methods and routes into the council to request assistance. So we've sort of addressing that now with a central point for schools to request assistance in a severe weather event. Opportunities to look to increase the bed capacity of SWEP. Some councillors using multiple routes to request assistance, which did lead to a duplication of some tasks and slightly delayed some of the responses. And some residents were criticising the council for not gritting all roads and pavements across the district. And if you have any questions, I've got Chris sitting next to me who could probably provide a good answer to that one. So I'll hand over back to you, Chair, for any questions.
Okay, right. So, Councillor Longstaff.
Yeah, I'll start with a couple. I read all the paperwork. I'm a relatively new councillor now, and we've got snow wardens who are volunteers. There's no mention of snow wardens in all the reports I read. And they also, and this is quite a few of them, felt unloved, if I use that expression. That they're asking for things and they felt as though they had no idea what were going on. So just part of your plan, can you try and involve the snow wardens who are volunteers?
Chris Johnson, Operation Manager Highways. Unfortunately, we've not got anybody here today. Although I look after the operational response during severe weather, I don't actually look after snow wardens. So I'm sorry, that's a little bit difficult for me to respond to.
There's a hand behind you, I think, Chair.
Catherine Armitage, Service Director for Environmental Strategy and Climate Change and Interim Service Director for Highways and Street Scene. So the snow wardens do sit under myself. The snow wardens were used, they are allocated a bag, they're trained, they're given equipment, and we do have a quite high number of snow wardens, and we do consider it a really successful scheme. Each year we survey the snow wardens and we ask them what's worked well for them and what hasn't worked well for them, and we've incorporated that feedback to make changes to the scheme over the years. So when we initially started the scheme, we gave them 2 bags of grit, for example, and they asked us to reduce that. It was too much for them to store in their own homes, and they asked for changes to that. After this event, we will ask snow wardens again. We do it annually, not after individual events, we do it annually. So we'll ask them again how they felt, and if we get that feedback from them, we'll act on that. So if you have individual feedback, please do send it to us. It's really useful to know. We've had quite positive feedback from the snow wardens, but as I said, we do an actual survey of them each year and ask them how we could improve the scheme or anything that they think they might benefit from.
Okay, thank you for that. But obviously, I can only say the few that got in touch with me were threatening to resign from that important role. And when I read all the reports, I didn't see anything about snow wardens, which is a volunteer outfit. We should support volunteers.
So, a request. Could we? You do the survey. Could we see the responses for that?
Yeah.
That's provided for the panel, because it would be interesting to give a bit of visibility to that, to sort of know how the scheme's going. So, great.
Yeah, of course.
Thank
And the numbers are going up year on year, so we are recruiting more people. But if there are people that have been unhappy, we definitely need to know about that, because, as you said, it's fantastic that people volunteer, and we need to support those people. They're out there in their communities doing something really important, so we need to make sure that they're supported. I think Councillor Ahmed might have wanted to come in.
Councillor Ahmed, Cabinet Member for the Environment and Highways. In terms of the snow wardens and not being used at that time, the extreme weather was such that it was inappropriate to be for the snow wardens to be there because of the ice conditions. So their use would have been completely, it would have been irrelevant, and it wouldn't have been the right response, because they were there to provide the grit and to clear up. And in terms of the adverse conditions, the snow wardens under health and safety was not the right time to be using them at that position.
I think I have to come back on that. Why do we have snow wardens? Well, it snows, it's hazardous conditions, and then we say, well, it's hazardous, so we don't use them.
No, all that snow's getting in the way.
Yeah, I think we need that probably.
Sorry, it's not the snow, it's when the adverse conditions of snow -8 was there and it was freezing, and even the grit wasn't going to be working, and the slope clearance was not going to be working. So it wasn't appropriate to be using the snow.
Did we explain this to the snow wardens? Anyhow.
So, are you saying to us that the snow wardens were not used during the snow? Is that what you're saying to us?
They were used. Snow wardens did help during the snow. I think what Councillor Ahmed may be referring to is some snow wardens may be wanting to do more than we'd expect of them. So potentially snow wardens wanting to get out and grit on roads and do things that are above and beyond we would expect of them to safely do. So they have an absolutely vital role. I think Councillor Ahmed might be referring to them wanting to do even more, because they are great community advocates and they want to do as much as they can. We want them to do things, but we also want to keep them safe. They were absolutely used and deployed, and there were snow wardens out and about doing things during that period.
Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, this is about snow wardens, and this is about lessons learned, isn't it? I think the council missed a trick, because there were an awful lot of people who were interested when the snow was around and just afterwards, immediately afterwards, about snow wardens, and yet we didn't promote the scheme at that time when we could have got a lot of volunteers. So I think that's, this is about lessons learned. In the immediate aftermath of an event like that, people will be thinking about it and will be willing to step forward. If you go and ask them 6 months later, they'll have forgotten all about it. So I think you missed a trick. Let's try, if we get it again, that we don't miss that trick next time. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I should have pointed out as well, a lot of Kirklees people, a lot of our communities did a fantastic job. I know sometimes we come across as though we're nitpicking a bit, but we're trying to make it so next time we've learnt some lessons, which is this is what it's all about. Grit boxes and getting new grit boxes. Everyone whinges to me about, well, they won't refill them, or I can't get a new one. We've got a new housing estate, but we've no grit box. So how are we going to put that into an action plan to try and address the supplies and resupplying?
Chris Johnson again, Operational Manager Highways. So there's 1,450 grit bins on the network, should be placed on the network that's not treated as part of our precautionary gritting. We have a policy, of course, an operational plan, which is published on the website for this year. So due to resources, the council has for a long time has not been providing any further grit bins on the network. There's 1,450, that is a substantial amount, more than anybody else in West Yorkshire, other authorities. A substantial effort needed to fill them, about 3 weeks it takes us to fill those. There are opportunities for councillors to consider moving grit bins within wards. Obviously that can be quite a difficult ask to agree amongst themselves where, well, this grit bin needs to be moved and to be placed elsewhere, but that does exist. We have asked councillors, I think it was last season, and reminded of their grit bin locations and if they wanted to consider moving any. We're currently filling grit bins at the beginning of the season, and then depending on weather conditions during the season, a decision is taken on whether we should refill them again. And we refilled them in October last year, and then during and towards the end of the severe weather event that we had at the beginning of January, we refilled them again.
Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, there's a couple of points on that. Firstly, it's an impossible ask to ask councillors to move grit bins, because what you're saying to us is go and tell some residents that they're not going to get access to grit anymore because we're going to give it to these people over here. It's impossible. It won't work. The current policy does not work. We've said it doesn't work for a number of years, and yet the administration persists with it. We've seen in the budget that we got through that there's more money going into winter maintenance. How's that going to be used to increase the gritting that's done? I have a health centre that's not gritted to. I have an adult respite centre that isn't gritted to. But these are supposed to be things that are gritted to, but they're not done. You can't say that we've got an ambitious target in terms of housing growth, that you're never going to grit any of these roads or estates that are built. And I'm sure I certainly had the experience, and I'm sure other councillors did as well, of people on these new estates going, well, where's the gritting? What's happening? We pay council tax as everybody else does. And they're right. Yes, there are financial challenges, but we need to recognise that there is an expectation of our residents that we support all residents across the district. And if you're just unfortunate enough to have moved into a house that's been built in the last few years, you're not going to get any help from the council, because that's effectively what the policy says. And that policy isn't sustainable. So can you tell me what we're doing about looking again at that policy in recognition of what happened in January, and also on the basis that we have, as a council, agreed to increase the budget for winter maintenance? How is that going to be used to try and address some of these issues that there may be only 3 of us here today, but if you had 69 councillors here, I'm sure they'd all be saying exactly the same thing. And don't give me examples of we have more grit bins than the rest of West Yorkshire. Last time I looked, we're a lot more hilly than the likes of Leeds or Wakefield. So they're not true comparisons really, are they? You've got to look at the topography, because that's what drives where gritting is needed, not the fact that we're compared with our other West Yorkshire authorities. That doesn't work for me, and it never has done. And what I've said today, I said in scrutiny meetings in the past, and it's been tended to be ignored by the administration. So it'd be interesting to see if the administration does actually do anything different in terms of lessons learned about how we improve the experience for our residents that are trying to get about the district, get to work, get to support people. You know, I've had examples of carers who couldn't get to the places they needed to go and, see people who were isolated. These are the problems that we face. And it's not good enough to just say, well, this is our policy and we're sticking with it. Sorry, a bit of a rant. Sorry, Chair.
Do you want to, anybody want to respond to that particular point made? Nope, okay.
I can come in on the winter policy. So the winter policy is reviewed annually, so it will go through a review again. And there was a suggestion that in addition to this piece, that was about the weather in broadest sense, and all of the different services, the specific element of the winter policy came through scrutiny as it was annually reviewed. So that's the document that you're referring to with all of those things in. So there is an opportunity for that to come through scrutiny as well. I think it's actually on the agenda, isn't it, to come through. So that can be looked at specifically, which addresses some of the things that you're raising. I take your point on the topography of Kirklees. We are very hilly, but even by comparison to other hilly areas, we do have a higher number of grit bins per untreated network. But I take your point, topography is absolutely key in terms of gritting. But we do compare well, and in terms of the amount of the network we grit, we compare really well as well, but we don't grit every single road and every single person's house to where they might want to get, because that would be unfeasible, it would be unpractical. We look at the priority network and grit that.
I was just going to come in. Sorry.
Apologies.
I was just going to come up back, Councillor Taylor there. Obviously, there's extensive building in my neck of the woods. We are hilly. It seems crazy to me not to have a new estate with 100, 150 houses in a hilly condition and not have any new grit bins with that building site. It just seems common sense to me. But I would like to reiterate for the minutes, I do appreciate all the hard work that went on with every Kirklees employee. And the guys here today, you did a fantastic job. This is just, if you like, the 1%, which we're trying to say as councillors, this is how people feed back to us. And we're supposed to be in the heart of the organisation as councillors. So it's a plea. Let's have a rethink on just a few issues, that's all. And that's a rant, Chair, sorry.
I'd also like to express my appreciation for the work that staff did in difficult conditions, and I do appreciate that. And yes, there are things that we come up with. Going through the report, have we any more questions from members of the panel? I've got a few to come back. Some people are suffering in silence. I never hear the people who are suffering in silence. We all hear the people who aren't. I'm just wondering how we identify those people who are not telling us that they're having issues and having problems, and how we try and address it, and how we know that they're suffering in silence, and what we can do. Who are these people?
Hi, Chair. It's Paul Farndale, Flood Management. From a purely flood risk perspective, yeah, the council's not perhaps the first body that comes into mind when you've been flooded. Obviously, we have intelligence for doing the job and recording flood incidents over the year where we can predict where the main areas are. But you, just to put it into some kind of context, one of the worst flooding that we have had has been at the top of the catchment at Lindley back in 2007, where we had a Weatherhill Road at 3 metres deep and submerging cars. That thing gets into the paper, and that's one of the problems, is that, yeah, people with social media can go to the Huddersfield Examiner before they even think about the council. So there is a sweep that we do, as well as what we can do as well is that there's a non-emergency flood reporting portal on the website, which we work with our communications team to try and gather information on that. And it is working with yourselves as well, that come to you. It's by its very nature, it's chaotic. But it's reaching out in terms of social media. We have things coming in, like a gentleman had to be housed for the night in a care home. That came through a different channel, and we follow up all these. So it's a gathering information both externally and internally from different departments, because those sort of things can come in, but they're all flood related. So there is an exercise that goes on in the weeks after the flood, and I've pretty much stopped took us till March to do the full sweep. So it is an ongoing process. Video captures come up a few days afterwards, and it's piecing them all together. Websites, also West Yorkshire Police, Fire Brigade have their own list. So I just want to convey you that it's a lot of internal partnership working and external partnership working. And yes, do we get them all? Possibly not. There might be somebody that's so used to doing it that they don't tell us, but it is important. And I think this sort of thing needs to probably go out in council of bulletins. I don't know if you'll agree, but I'm asking you the question. Because we need this information, and it's threefold, really. It's for future investigations. Officers move on, retire. I'm adamant, because I've worked here 15 years, that there's been a culture change, but that needs to continue, that we get everything out of people's heads and we get it onto a system. I'm adamant about that. And it helps us, new people that come in, can see what's happened before and make quicker and better decisions. There's also the planning process, where we know it's flooding, even if it's somebody's cellar, because you don't want somebody, a new developer putting soakaways when we've got Victorian cellars that are not tanked out, except the little minute detail, but it's important that we can feed back into the planning process and make better decisions at planning, because we know what it might affect or be affected by in that respect. And finally, it's evidence for bid work. We've been relatively successful in the last year or so. As just pointing out to my colleagues, we've already had flood management on Scrutiny a few weeks ago, so the councils are fair with us. We've been successful in some of our bid work, probably more so than we have been in the last 10 or 15 years. And we need to push that forward now and get so all this evidence is vital towards pushing forward to that, whether it's a very small scheme that might affect 2 or 3 houses, but we can reduce the likelihood of flooding to perhaps a larger catchment-based scheme that reduces the likelihood of flooding to a lot more people. So hopefully I conveyed that it's internal, it's external, but again, it's working with yourselves, it's any knowledge. So I think after flood events, I think the review was that we'd look at communications and how we get that out as quickly as possible. And I am taking your point, because you have to do it in the first couple of weeks afterwards, otherwise it fades away quickly.
So I'll take Sean, then I'll take John.
So just to add to Paul's comments, Paul's focus was mainly around flooding, but in any emergency we recognise that vulnerable people become even more vulnerable in an emergency. So we've got plans and procedures in place to try and identify them. The challenge always is the people that are quiet, that don't come forward, are very difficult to identify. And we've got different mechanisms to try and identify them, and sometimes it's just people on the ground, so your community support people. We've got emergency volunteers. We deploy them to an area and literally go door knocking, checking to make sure that people are okay. We'd also get messages out around a good neighbour principle. So like if you haven't heard about it from your neighbour, can you just check to make sure they're all right and give them a number where they can contact us, an emergency number, so they can get help. So there's lots of different ways we can try and support people in an emergency, but there is no, I wish there was a silver bullet moment that we're acute to it, because there isn't. We've just got to try as best. And obviously, you've mentioned that yourselves are at the heart of the council. You're a mechanism for telling us if you become aware of vulnerable people in your community. We'll listen to your needs and we'll respond to those. So it's not perfect. It never is. And any emergency that happens around the country, the challenge is supporting vulnerable people in an emergency. But usually that involves getting people on the ground, door knocking.
Very much in favour of that. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, the one thing that's not mentioned in here, but was, both the staff were incredible, but was a big issue, is the bins. Because actually this severe weather event in January couldn't have happened at a worse time of the year, could it? Because it happened just after we'd had that break, so the bins hadn't been collected. And then one of the consequences of the freezing on top of the snow was on most roads, at the edge of the road, you had this nice little bump where all the snow had been pushed to one side. It had frozen. And then the poor binmen were trying to drag bins over it. So, they need recognition for what they did do, but also perhaps some thought about, because they were setting off to go out in the mornings, and certainly some of the roads I was walking on, certainly wasn't driving on, but walking on, I'm thinking, if you've got one of these big bin wagons going down here, there's cars abandoned all over the place, the road's icy as hell, You know, it was dangerous for them to drive down some of the roads. I think, you know, I'm amazed at the skill that there weren't more incidents or accidents, damaged cars or whatever, just as a result of it. But it doesn't seem to have been picked up in here, but it's probably a pertinent point because, you know, they had a substantial challenge and they tried their best to get as many bins as they could whilst recognising that it was challenging. It's more a comment really, you know, if we're doing lessons learned.
Sean?
We haven't shared the full debrief report with you. We've got a more extensive debrief report. The presentation you've got is more or less a summary of the main points that came out of it. Without having a look at the full debrief report, I can't tell you if bins were mentioned in there, but we do recognise that they did a sterling job catching up, and it couldn't have come at a worse time. Yeah, and it's for all the reasons you've articulated, there was challenges. The network, I mean, Chris can probably answer this better than me. I think we did a sterling job keeping the network running. There was some challenges around pavements and some of the back roads. And there always is going to be in a severe weather event that lasts such a long time. But teams did a sterling job, and it's thank you to yourselves for recognising that, because, I mean, yeah, we recognise that.
Okay, so I've got a few questions about the severe weather EP. What is it? Emergency plan. There's only 6 bed spaces for people sleeping rough. How many bed and breakfast places did we need to buy? Because I'm just trying to get an idea of the size of the problem.
So we've got the figures for there have been 2 periods of severe weather emergency protocol triggered over this winter. First one was in November, and then the second one was over the long period of cold weather just after New Year. So between them, these are the numbers, 43 placements in the first period in November and 31 in the January period.
So having 6 places available is a severe under provision.
Well, they're not all in. They're not all bed and breakfast. Those figures. So, in the first instance, all 6 places will have been used up on any given night in the shared facility that we offer firsthand. It does mean that there is that significant overspill into bed and breakfast. It's not consistently every night have swept that number in bed and breakfast. The cost to the council obviously comes associated with bed and breakfast placements. We're keen to kind of minimise those costs. We've started a process of engaging with partners to try and identify whether they can support with providing more shared spaces during periods of severe weather. We've put out a proposal to see if there are any interested parties coming forward to extend that number of 6 shared spaces that we have available to us. The costs, the bed and breakfast costs associated with severe weather, we do access government grant funding to pay for those costs, and it wasn't a significant cost this winter, but we are trying to reduce those numbers of bed and breakfast placements that we use during severe weather. And we are hopeful that partners will support us with that. We will support partners with kind of on the day and after the day support from our service if they are able to stand up some accommodation spaces for severe weather. But it's an area where it's really difficult to stand that up, because you only want to access the provision during periods of severe weather. You don't get that much notice for when the weather's going to be cold enough to trigger our emergency protocol, and you know any service provider would need to be
willing and able to mobilise at very short notice, get a building ready, get beds ready, get people ready to keep the residents safe during the night. So it's not a small undertaking to ask partners for that support, but we are actively engaging with them. We're hoping that we'll get some interest.
And I'm aware we may increase our capacity over the next year or so in terms of the amount of emergency accommodation available, so that might make life a little easier.
It might make life easier, yeah. Any increase in available temporary accommodation will make a difference, but if we, just as a reminder, the severe weather protocol is for accommodating rough sleepers or people at risk of rough sleeping who we wouldn't otherwise owe a temporary accommodation duty towards. So the additional temporary accommodation that we're bringing online will be for primarily for people that we do owe that temporary accommodation duty to.
And I note in the report it says some councillors, and this isn't the tone, were using multiple routes to request council assistance. This led to duplication of tasks and delayed the response. So sorry, I think that was me on at least one occasion. I think the issue with that is, I mean, you're saying go through council inquiries, and I completely understand that. But sometimes when council's been around a while, they know who to talk to try and get things sorted, and so they try and go around the system, I guess, I don't know. But it's for me, it was, getting a community centre path gritted and sorting that out. That was that's why I used multiple routes, and ended up with enough grit for next year. So that was that. So my apologies for being guilty of that. Okay. The other thing was the gritting, going back to the gritting just a little bit, and the grit bins. It's the flexibility in policy that I'd like to look at a wee bit. And forgive me for coming up with a parochial Newsham ward issue, but we have Malvern Road, which is a steep road that goes down into Newsham Road, and every year without fail, when there is snow and ice on there, traffic sort of hurtles down into the road. There are collisions. It's a complete nightmare every year, and predictably it's a complete nightmare every year. So the question is not particularly about that. I mean, it's a very short stretch of road, and it's got 3 grit bins on it, and I'm not going to move them anywhere, that's for sure. But the point is, the broader point, rather than my parochial one, is where there's flexibility, where there are things where we say, look, I know we've got a one refill policy, but actually this one needs 2 or 3 or whatever it happens to be. It's that where can we make flexibility to enable us to to deal with issues and not, if you like, be too rigid. And I don't think that's a license for councillors to say, I want this doing, I want that doing, I want the other doing. I think it's a degree of flexibility on the system to enable things to be better. Any thoughts on that?
So all policies allow for discretion, and in this winter period we did exercise discretion. So as the service director, I asked for the grit bins to be refilled, which isn't something we would normally do. But it was extremely cold weather, it was unusual circumstances, having had the 2 events one after the other, and for the length of period that it lasted. So the policy does allow for discretion in certain circumstances, and I think you can see this time we did exercise that. So hopefully you would trust that when needed we can exercise discretion, but we do also have to be consistent and fair in how we treat wards and councillors and grit. So there is the balance between the 2 things, isn't there? And hopefully we get that right, but sometimes we might not. I think this time we did get it right with having those bins refilled.
If I could just come back on that a little bit, because I think there's targeted discretion and there's blanket discretion, isn't there? And so, I think what I was talking about here was like targeted discretion to be able to deal with a particular issue, which might be a variation in the policy and a variation in the approach. And the whole thing about being consistent, actually things are not the same everywhere all the time, are they? And so consistency can sometimes be the enemy of doing the right thing. And so, yeah, it's having the flexibility early enough to be able to do the right thing, to stop us having to sort of like be castling you guys at a difficult time, going, look, it's happened again. It's the same thing that happens every year. So so that's the plea really about the virtue of having a certain amount of flexibility as opposed to consistency, really. Councillor Taylor.
Just one other thought, and it's a planning thing really, but if the council's going to say they ain't going to grit any roads on new estates, which is the council's stated policy, surely we ought to have something in planning to make sure that the management companies that are being set up for these estates have some responsibility for gritting those roads for residents. I don't know whether that's even doable, but it's certainly something to think about and look at. And all I'm doing here is making suggestions. But, you know, it's not fair on residents that they're just stuck there when they bought a new house. We need to help them in some way. And if we're saying we're not going to do it because our policy is we ain't touching those new estates, we ought to be looking at planning to see if there's something we can do through planning.
So we haven't got planning colleagues here, but I'm going to take that away and ask that question because I'm not sure if that is our policy. So in that sense, but I'm going to go and check with planning. So I'll take that away and come back to you with an answer on that one.
Yeah, the nature of these estates anyway, they won't be on bus routes or major roads. So that would be consistent with the policy that we apply anyway. So I'd be surprised if they did come.
That said, if you think about the likes of Bradley or Dewsbury Riverside, is it realistic to say the whole of that development, we're not going to grit anywhere? There's going to be schools, there's going to be buses, there's going to be all sorts of things there. But our current policy says, nah, we're not doing it.
Yeah. What can we do with planning conditions, I guess, is one of the asks. Yeah.
We'll take that away and ask the question. I mean, we do an assessment to identify what our priority network is and isn't. So it's whether they would fall within that or not, wouldn't they? But they'd be treated the same as an existing estate. So I don't think a new estate would be treated different when we do the assessment, but I'll double check because we check what our priority network is for gritting or not. But in terms of requirements on planning, I'll definitely go away and ask that question as well.
Okay. Councillor Longstaff.
Yeah, just on a lighter note, just an observation. I've got close family that live in Lancashire. I won't mention the council's name, but I got marooned there for 2 days. We did a better job than them.
We did a better job than Lancashire. Excellent. Good. Okay. Thanks for that. Thank you all the officers who came for that item. If you need to leave now, that's absolutely fine. Thank you, and again, thanks for all the work you do, particularly in hard times and difficult conditions. Thank you. Right, we'll now go on to the next item, which is the Kirklees Highways 2-year capital plan. Just pause for a minute to allow people to make their way out. There will now be an intermission. and ready to roll. Good stuff. So, who's presenting on this item for us?
Thank you, Chair. Catherine Hunt, Operational Manager, Highway Assets.
Thank you.
So we're here today to present the 2 years Highways Capital Plan, 25-26, 26-27. So in summary, the Highways Capital Plan for 25-26 and 26-27 is a detailed programme of works to be implemented over those 2 years with provisional schemes identified for 26-27. The programme is outlined in Appendix A. The report is to advise Cabinet of the intended delivery programme for the Highways Capital Plan allocation for the years 25-26, 26-27. The report contains a breakdown showing the allocated budget and detailed programmes of planned works for all highway asset groups, including measures to improve road safety and or create better places through improvement works. So a bit of background. The government's arrangements to manage the delivery of the 25-26, 26-27 schemes within the capital plan are in place via regular monitoring of programmes and budgets, continuing to work closely with the West Yorkshire Combined Authority to ensure delivery of the programme and to maximise available funding. The City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, which funds a large proportion of the capital programme, supports our efforts to promote active travel, public transport and modal shift, which in turn supports the Council's 2038 climate change ambition. So this is a bit of an overview of the Highways Capital Plan. As I said in the previous slides, this is 25-26, 26-27. The programme has works and individual schemes for variety of assets, highways maintenance, structures, street lighting, public rights of way, highways drainage, highway safety and network management. Includes the Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement, which is the CRSTS1, and any other capital funding available to highways, including council borrowing and any other grants. The image at the side displays, obviously, those different funding streams and how they feed into the capital plan. I won't go through this slide in detail, but this breaks down the different funding pots and the budgets with a total plan value of circa 20.8 million. So this slide details how the programme is built up. So the various programme areas. So if we start with asset maintenance, so this includes highway maintenance, structures, street lighting, public rights of way and highway drainage. The programme is developed based on risk-based whole life cost assessments, cyclic condition assessments, ELBA, which obviously has ceased, structural assessments of structures and street lighting, and third-party condition assessments. Highway safety programme, that's built up of holistic casualty collision data, KSI or SLIGHT, patterns, trends and numbers, first year rate of return to identify suitable schemes and location. And then for network management, UTMC junction and crossing sites for replacement programme prioritised based using comparative age, condition, carbon usage and the availability of replacement traffic signal equipment to prioritise. The boxes to the right hand side illustrate the flight path for delivery. So the 2-year programme is developed, goes through the appropriate governance process, notification to required stakeholders, then obviously delivery of the programme. The images at the bottom of the slide talk about the prioritisation process in a bit more detail there. The fact that the capital works are identified considering the most effective, suitable, cost-effective intervention, where the aim is to maintain roads in good conditions in steady state within the available budgets rather than prioritising the worst roads that are in red condition. The work that we're doing supports the West Yorkshire Combine Authority objectives of promoting door-to-door connectivity, modal shift, improving cycle infrastructure and pedestrian crossings, keeping the network moving whilst using less carbon-intensive intervention. So this slide talks about the innovation, governance and performance of the programme, so what we're doing and how it contributes to the objectives within the council plan, and also how it meets the objectives of the combined authority, and also how it meets the required outcomes for the combined authority, which is conditions attached to the funding that we receive from them. There's detail on there regarding the performance, so financial reporting, how the output reporting is linked to Kirklees and the combined authority outcomes, and reporting on the asset condition itself. There's detail there regarding the governance, so we've got a dedicated capital works programme manager who manages and monitors the progress of the delivery of the programme. We have to report quarterly to the combined authority with regards to finance, progress, risk. And we're an instrumental lead at regional groups, including the Highway Infrastructure Asset Management Board, Road Safety and Network Management. From an innovation perspective, we're looking to further adopt the use of artificial intelligence to capture and assess the condition of the network. We are in the process of procuring a new asset management system, and we are looking at ways to improve the service request reporting process. So the recommendations, so we're asking members to approve the following: the budget and programme scheme allocations as outlined in the associated report and appendices for 25, 26, 26, 27, to allow the budget allocation and spend on the schemes identified to improve the highway network, increase safety on our roads and support the improvement of air quality and positively impact climate change across the district. To approve officer delegation to the Executive Director of Place in accordance with the Council Financial Procedure Rules and any other relevant legal requirements and governments, and the delegation of powers to the designated positions and for the period stated in the associated report, that in the event we are awarded any additional funding within year, they have the authority to develop, agree and implement the Highways Capital Programme. Thank you.
So thank you for that. And it's nice of you to ask us to approve the Highways Capital Plan and Budget. If only we could, but we're just the scrutiny panel, unfortunately. But there we go. But who knows? The council may change its governance model and things might improve. Anyway, Councillor Longstaff.
Yeah, I was just thinking there, when my old out of finance director, I thought, well, we can do that. Put a bit more money in the budget. To be serious, obviously we're signed on to Vision Zero. And I was surprised that there was no mention of Vision Zero in the documents I've read. That's the main aim of West Yorkshire. We're signed on as Kirklees. I know there was plenty about safety in roads, but nothing about Vision Zero.
Yeah, Phil Waddington, Highway Safety Group Engineer. I think... Oh, sorry, I'll just put that a bit closer. Yeah, like you say, we are sort of, as a council, committed to Vision Zero. I think the schemes within the capital plan have sort of been looked at with that in consideration. I think we've probably just missed an opportunity to mention a little bit within the detail of the presentation, but there is some nod to it in the report that Yvonne's just sort of passed across. So it is in there. It's probably not just, you know, quite as prominent as it probably should be, and something we probably need to shout a little bit more about and get it out there a little bit more. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we've got this policy. It's a very tough policy to get from where we are now to 2040 to have zero accidents, serious accidents. It's going to take a lot, and we need to get it mentioned so everyone's aware of this target. So that's my observation on that one.
Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I'm interested in the point on innovation. So there were 3 points there on innovation. I'm aware about the new asset management system that we're bringing in. And if I'm right, I'm just looking for confirmation really, that will improve the ability to let councillors know when you've reported things, whether things have been done or not. Because I think at the moment, well, not just councillors, but residents as well, I think at the moment, the system you use online doesn't link across to the back office system, so there's possibilities for things getting dropped accidentally or not posted correctly or whatever. And I'm hoping that's going to help with some of that, which kind of links to your third point about improvements to service request processes. I think though, if I'm right, I think those two are linked. But I'm also interested in knowing what sort of AI we're talking about using, because I've seen some examples demoed about what can happen, but I'd just be interested to know a little bit more, if we know that level of detail at the moment, about what we are looking to do in that space.
So it's primarily at this time regarding road condition assessment. So it's the use of mobile phones in vehicles driving the network, and it's being trained at the moment to identify the conditional requirements of the road surveys.
So effectively, we're scanning the road as they're driving along it, and we're training the AI to pick up, problems with the road surface. Mm-hmm. Cool. I love that.
So, Donna Hodgson, Operational Manager for Network Management. So just on that point around AI, in the network management world, we're also using AI to look at delivering efficient network management. So we've already partnering with University of Huddersfield to look at AI to counting vehicles on the network and then distributing the amount of green time on the network in accordance with how people are presenting at certain junctions. So that's something that's in place now. We've also been developing that package of work to work with bus movements as well. So we're working with the combined authority on using AI-driven network management tools to make sure that buses keep on time. So there's lots of developments around AI that could really benefit our services.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. So we also use AI currently on the same basis as we're using it from a road condition perspective, looking at certain aspects of road markings, for example, to build our forward programme using technology called Visala. And we are using it within our street lighting service as well, looking at identifying sign faces and possibly where sign faces are missing. So.
Better mention it now. Every councillor's favourite topic, potholes and various things like that. Obviously, I mentioned it before that the councillors are supposed to be the heart of the council. Obviously, we're well aware we get reports to us, whinges if you like, or issues raised. How can you involve us? Because, like, for example, my good friend over there is a Dalton councillor, and when they closed that road behind what I call ICI, old ICI there, that put a lot of pressure on a lot of roads. And they were in a bad state already, and I know I'm being parochial, but they got in a worse state. How do we bring that into the equation of the plans that you've got? When you have a closure out of the blue for months, putting pressures on all the other road services, how can you amend your plan to take that into account? Lady behind's got her hand up, so.
Yes, so in terms of making sure that everybody has up-to-date information around road closures or even the impact that they might have from roadworks, it may not be a road closure, then we do promote the use of a system called Network. So the council's bought into this system. It's a free-to-use platform where, you know, anybody can go on there and see what's happening in their street, in their region, in the area, in the region, in the country, to see which journey you're taking, what roadworks are on that bit of network that you're interested in. And not only does it tell you where there's roadworks, it will tell you who's doing the work, how long they're likely to be there, what's the likely impact of those works on your journey. So it's very simple to use, colour-coded, high impact will be red, and so people can see what's going to happen on their network. And there is the facility to look forward. So it's not just what's happening on the network today, it's what's happening up to 12 months. Obviously, the longer you look forward, the less accurate it's going to be, because roadworks can be reactive, emergency works that happen today.
But how do we pick up when it's like unintended consequences of a road closure, where people then, instead of going on the main route, say to Leeds, that can be jammed for an hour at rush hours, they start going through estates or by schools? How do we pick that up?
So we can't always prevent that, because Paul's left now, but traffic is a bit like water. It will find a route through. So we know where we're likely to see some problems, and we can preempt that in the way that we work with those works promoters. Some of those works promoters are our own service delivery works, the work that we're talking about here, but some of that work is delivered from utility companies, developers, etc. So in setting up those arrangements around roadworks, we will ensure that we raise those concerns in advance so that we try and minimise the impact on those routes. Where you've got something like Dalton Bank Road, where the road has collapsed, it wasn't planned works. We didn't anticipate that happening, so we have to make the best of it and try and get those messages out. All those restrictions are on the System 1 network, and diversions are shown on that system.
If I can just come back and challenge slightly. Obviously, I'll mention the road. I am being parochial, Lassells Hall Road, and it were bad condition before, but now a lot of traffic has gone that way. How do we as a council then prioritise that work?
Slightly different question,
yeah.
That. So I'll let Catherine answer that around prioritising the works.
So with regard to that particular section of road, it had been identified by our asset maintenance technicians for repair towards the end of the last financial year, but unfortunately there wasn't sufficient funding remaining in the budget. So that particular section of road will be repaired this financial year. The short section, not the full length, just to clarify. But from a perspective, we have asset maintenance technicians who are out on the network the majority of the time. We have a robust safety inspection regime, and depending on the category of the road will depend how regularly that road is inspected. We do also rely on members of the public reporting to us as well. That is a fundamental part of our process as well.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just on the one network, and again, it's a suggestion to take away and think about, Donna. It would be great if that was in, what do we call them? The where you log on as a member and you can see when your bins are going to be collected, and that. I can't remember what it's called.
Find My Street, is it?
No. It's a Kirklees. What is it? What's it called? My Kirklees. Is it My Kirklees where you can log on and it'll tell you, when your bins are going to be collected, if there's any planning applications near where you are. It'd be great to have that linked into that. Something to take. I'm not asking you to do it today, but just a thought.
Yeah.
And then just one other thought, Catherine, on the AI. One of the problems we quite often get as councillors is where there has been a repair, and it can be our own teams, it can be utilities, but it's not done particularly well, and it starts to break up. And I know that we don't have the capacity to go out and check every single replacement that's been done by a utility, where they've dug a trench or whatever. But the AI could help us pick some of those up, couldn't it? When it's out looking, because you see, I see them myself, you see a pothole and there's been a pile of tarmac dumped in it. It's not been sealed around the edges, and you think, yeah, that'll be gone in 3 months' time, won't it? All we need is a bit of bad weather. So perhaps our AI could pick some of that up as well.
So if I could just come back on that, we are using AI. The video footage that Catherine's team collects, my team then use that video footage to go back to the utility companies, and we use it sort of 360. So my team that work with the utility companies will be asking them to go back and rectify that work at their expense, so it doesn't end up as our expense in the future. There's a time limit on it, and unfortunately we can't go in and inspect every single site in the network when it's live. We do get round as many as we can, but the AI is great because that gives us that time-stamped evidence to be able to go back and say that this was caused by you on this date, and then we pursue them to rectify it.
Right. Okay, so a few questions from me. Highways maintenance funding top-up. I was having a read through that, and it was saying about this that some of the funding would be held back until local authorities can provide their meeting certain criteria. And a number of things occurred to me about that. One of which is probably just an observation, which is that either we've got funding that's devolved or it's not devolved. And so if it's devolved, we'll decide what happens with it and how we work it, either at the West Yorkshire level, but preferably at the Kirklees level. So it felt to me like government wasn't really devolving when I read that. Then, of course, the other thing was, what are the certain criteria?
So it's, if we recall, probably pre the CRSTS settlement, there was something called the incentive fund from the Department for Transport, where we had to demonstrate the level of asset management that we were operating as a district. And the requirements from the local highway maintenance fund top-up are going to be quite similar. So they're wanting to understand the condition of your network, number of potholes. The letter has been released by government recently. So your road condition, number of potholes, what type of work you're doing, where you're doing it. And we have to publish a report on our website.
Thanks. Again, it doesn't sound like devolution, does it? It sounds like top-down government. But that's just a politician making an observation, which, but there we go. Okay, going a bit further through the report, climate change, and you helpfully provide the reductions indicated by West Yorkshire to meet the 2038 target, and the targets that we've got, which is 63% reduction by 2025 this year, 78% by 2030, and on and on. And what it does say here is that we're not going to achieve the net zero target by 2038 at any scale. So I guess the first question is okay, but where are we? Have we done some of the reductions, none of the reductions? Have we got added increases? So we've got to measure about where we ought to be reducing to, but no mention of how we're doing.
Do you want me to come in on that one? So I think this is referring to the whole of West Yorkshire and the targets set across the whole of West Yorkshire. Obviously, we then have our own individual targets which do align, and we have our climate change action plan, which we do monitor and evaluate every year, so we can share the monitoring, evaluation and the climate change action plan document. And then in addition to that, we also have the environment strategy as well, don't we, which has further environmental targets that go beyond just the climate. So we have our own targets, but then there's also how we're doing on a West Yorkshire trajectory, and then there's how we're doing as a nationally, isn't there, as well? So there's a recognition of how we're doing nationally towards our targets, how we're doing regionally, and then how we're doing locally, and they're all slightly different, but these are very, very tough targets, as we all know, and influenced across lots of different scales, in that every single one of those influences the others, as you will know. You know, what's happening at a national level will influence what you can do at a local level, and vice versa, because every single layer of government only has an element of control. So there will be differences between your ability to meet your own direct emissions and the wider district emissions, or contribute to the regional emissions or the national emissions. As I'm sure you already know that, but it's just important that to understand there's the different layers of it, and there's the different plans within which we operate.
I do appreciate it's a complex picture. Yeah, it just would have been nice to see within the report something which was comparative, which showed Kirklees where we were at.
We can definitely bring some Kirklees data if that's needed.
Yeah, the street lighting aspect of things. Street lighting, we have... Oh, did you want to come back on that at all? No, right, okay. So I'm aware that some of our first street lights, LED street lights, went in about 20 odd years ago, because they went in the Newsom ward, actually, which I was really rather pleased about, because we were the innovators there, due to a budget amendment that we put in. I'm aware that, of course, they're 20 years old and that technology will have improved. So I'm just wondering about what has if now we ought to be looking at, if you like, second, third generation LED streetlights, and if there are efficiencies that we may gain from new technology there that that we might not be realising at the moment, as well as obviously doing the great stuff about getting rid of concrete columns, which are very difficult to put election boards around.
I think from a highways perspective with regards to the LEDs, unfortunately it does come down to budget, and as the report states, the capital is being spent on end-of-life column replacements. We do have the framework has recently gone out for the procurement of street lanterns, and so any lanterns that are replaced are obviously replaced with the latest technology to a British standard specification that we have. So from that perspective, we are replacing with the latest technology. It just isn't wholesale at this time.
I do appreciate the budget aspects. It was just about what the potential was, really, the potential for improvement, and so we could make a judgment about, if we wanted to put more money into it, if that existed, what the benefits would be of it in terms of saving energy and reducing our emissions. Okay. Any more on the Highways Capital Plan? Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Okay, and the work programme for 24-25. I'd like to thank officers for all the work they've done through this municipal year. Thank you, Jodie, for keeping us all in check. Anybody want to bring up anything on the work programme, though it will be a new municipal year when a lot of this stuff comes forward. No? Okay, so conclude the meeting. Thank you, everybody.